Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 38, The Music of Broke, with our guest via Skype, Lauren Renee Hotchkiss. Hey Lauren, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hi, good to be here, Gina.
Well, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, that's a big subject, but I'll take a crack at it. My name's, again, Lauren Renee Hotchkiss, and I'm currently a student at Pacific School of Religion, pursuing a Master's of Divinity degree. I'm also a musician, primarily church and pagan ritual musician, playing a number of different styles. Yeah, I guess that's good for right at the moment.
So, what kind of music do you usually do? Like, you said both pagan and Christian? Is that?
Yeah, I do a lot. I mean, I have a background in secular music, too. Everything from rock and roll to folk to classical, Celtic. And that kind of carries over into the spiritual music that I do, too. I'm capable of composition and writing something from a more classical standpoint, but I also put a lot of contemporary in some of the stuff that I write and perform. I'm currently a musician at Grace North Church in Berkeley, but I also play for their labyrinth service every month, which is kind of like Taize with a labyrinth walk mixed in it too, and involved in playing in about 3 or 4 different Taize ensembles every month as well.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
What do you find important about spiritual music? Because I haven't really interviewed anybody about music before.
Oh, cool.
So what do you find important, and what do you think are the differences between, say, doing music for a particularly Christian service versus a particularly pagan service?
Okay. Well, let's break down that into components. I got called to music very early in life. I wasn't cognizant at that time that it was God that was calling me. It's just I love music ever since I could literally crawl up on a piano bench. I was there. In fact, I still have a picture of me at about age 4, sitting in front of a Magnus chord organ, the one that just had buttons on one side and you play a keyboard on the other. And I looked like serious, like a little Beethoven or something. And it's like, as I went through life and got involved with composition and songwriting, it was very important to me that both the lyrics could stand as a poetic statement, and that the music too could stand strongly on its own. And I was writing some spiritual music as I went along, but then about 3-4 years ago, I made the commitment to do, I won't say exclusively that, but mostly that. And it's just my main spiritual practice. It's a way that I just can be in communion with the divine myself, and the music I'm giving, I hope touches others as well. I have the experience that, well, that's kind of like what Einstein said about inspiration, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. I'm giving these ideas, but it's not like God says, okay, here's a whole symphony, just write it down. It's like a little bit, then I've got to really work at it for a while, and then I get some more inspiration. And there are times where I've written some things in 5 minutes, and then there's my music drama, Question of Sanity, that took me 10 years. Usually they don't take that long. I didn't realize it was going to be a whole long thing when I first started it. But most pieces are a matter of weeks, or days or weeks, but they can be longer.
Right. Well, it's like most creative pursuits, I do writing, and right now I'm kind of going through a dry spell, but there's some times where I write, it's just kind of like, bleh, everything comes out at once.
Yeah. I have a background and education as a writer as well, and I think that helps me as a musician, because I just see how the importance of both.
So to go back to the second part of the question, what are the differences between doing something particularly Christian versus something doing particularly pagan?
Well, I think the form is different, but I think the intent is very similar, to help create and reinforce sacred space, to just be aware of the intention of the service or the ritual, and doing what I can to help with that.
There's a lot of, shall we say, pop music that's either specifically Christian or specifically pagan. And I'm wondering what you think of that, because there's some of it where I'm just kind of like, oh my. And there's some of it that's really good. But boy, there's a lot of it that's just kind of like, wow, really? You wrote that? You know?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, there's some that really touch me. I often listen to K-Love, which is Christian rock, and a lot of it really touches me because I think it can touch a lot of people. Some of it is a little too Jesus-y, and let me see, what am I trying to say here? I'm basically a syncretist, so I'm trying to reach as many people as possible and not offend people. Not to the extent that I'm going to create pablum music, but just trying to touch everybody's spirits, what we have in common, rather than differences. That's what I'm very much dedicated to.
Right. How does music inform your own spirituality, and how do you use it in your own personal practice?
Sometimes when I'm composing or writing something, there's a little bit of difference between composition and being a singer-songwriter. I'm going in with an intention, and often that intention is there throughout, and sometimes it is refined by the inspiration that I'm getting. Other times, I didn't have something in mind, and Holy Spirit, the great gods of the cosmos, whatever you want to call it, just comes in, and I just roll with that. And I found in both cases there can just be great learning of taking me places that I hadn't been before. I've also experienced that when I've done co-writing. That too will take you to a different place than you ever would have thought on your own. And I've done, I guess of my spiritual writing, there's only been one that I've done so far, but it turned out really, really well.
What was it?
Oh, it was a song called Oh God, and it was just about that dark night of the soul when you just don't feel like there's any hope, and all you can do is cling to faith. And it doesn't matter whether it's Christian or pagan. It's just believing. Just believing there's more than this moment, and there's something greater than that.
Is there kind of activism as well in some of your music? Do you have causes that you will write music for?
Mostly I'm looking at the deeper causality of spirit rather than the causes of events in this world. However, having said that, sometimes things come along that I've got to address. Like after 9/11 happened, I first wrote a very angry song because I was so furious with George Bush and how he was handling everything, that I wrote a song called The Day America Screamed. That every time I played it, I practically blew my voice out. Wow. Then after a little while, I was able to write a composition that did not have words, that had more reflection to it. It was called September Mass. Wow. It just kind of chronicled the event from the piece before the attacks to everything, all the mixed emotions around it, and then synthesizing all that and coming back to a place of of peace.
Sounds like a really interesting piece, actually, especially, given that your first one was so angry, and then have kind of like working through the emotions of it after a while.
Yeah, and I've done a smattering of social justice songs. Mostly we're having to do with war, which is my big thing. It seems like it is such an incredible waste, and I wish we'd mature beyond the need to do that. Mm-hmm. And it recently happened again with Black Lives Matter. I haven't actually written a song about that, but it's definitely a social justice cause that I got very involved with, enough that I got arrested and sent to Santa Rita for the night, along with several other people from PSR and the GTU. We became known as the GTU 14.
Yeah, I read about that, actually. And I remember reading that you were there and, several other people were there. And I was hoping that, at least you were treated well in the prison because, given the fact that there were several trans people in the group, it's just like, oh, crap. That was the first thing that I thought about. And I was just like, oh, crap, I hope they're treated well.
Well, trans didn't turn out to be an issue. It was less of one on my case anyway, because I'm post-op, but I was concerned about another person with us that was pre-op. But it didn't turn out to be a problem. In terms of being well treated, well, no, we were not. That's a larger discussion than maybe we want to go into here. But there were some that were treated much worse, that were held longer, that were beaten, that were shot by rubber bullets, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, well, I remember because I think I've talked about it before on another podcast, but I was arrested in New York City at the 2004 Republican National Convention doing actually, I didn't even get to the protest. I was actually rounded up well before we even did any protesting. The most I had was some buttons on me, right? Mm-hmm. And, so I understand how it feels to be rounded up and put in not so great conditions and eating nasty cheese sandwiches and things like that. And it was just, it made me really realize what people go through in our justice, quote unquote, system. And, it really changed my life as far as seeing what people go through and how, I was lucky because I was a white cisgendered woman.
And we experienced that too. There was only one person of color among us. We were all trained protest chaplains. We went through specific training and went there with the intention to do what we could to help keep things peaceful. And I have to also admit that we had white privilege. We had an attorney secured by PSR to represent us. Many people did not have that. All the charges against us were dropped, but the CHP made it very clear that they could change their mind anytime in the next year and could reinstitute charges. I certainly hope that they do not.
Right. Yeah, I had something similar where it's called an ACD, and basically for 6 months I had to be a good girl and and not do anything bad, and then the charges would be dropped eventually. And but it's just like our system is just so messed up. It just really, the policing system is just really messed up now. And I think it stems from 9/11, and I think maybe your music has actually kind of captured that between the angry stuff and trying to come around back to a peaceful side of it. But I don't think we've gotten back to that peaceful side of 9/11 yet.
No, we have a long way to go. And actually, when I went for my SRS, sexual offense surgery, that I went right after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And I had somehow, I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I think I was between having IDs. I'd either lost it or I was getting a new one, and I didn't have a picture ID with me. And boy, they made it so incredibly difficult for me. Certainly I wasn't physically at my best at that point.
Right.
But yeah, it was very rough.
Would you do something like that again? Would you do a protest like that again?
That is a difficult question. I'm not sure if I would be involved with shutting down a freeway again. It's very effective, but we've done it once. And also you have to consider that there might have been somebody on that freeway that was going to a hospital or something else. And I'd hate to be responsible for somebody dying or being seriously compromised because they could not get somewhere on that freeway. And yet, if you just, take out a permit from the police and march quietly around the block, you're not accomplishing very much either. So I think we're still in discovery about what can be the most effective thing to do. But obviously, more work does need to be done.
Well, that was the thing, too, in seeing some of the reactions online to that protest and other protests where they've shut down BART and things like that, where, some people are like, well, what about the people that have to go to work? And what about the people that are, what about your own people that are using BART to get to their jobs and to get to places? And somebody had mentioned how, sometimes it takes shutting down those systems and being that radical about it to actually get anything done. And so it's kind of, I know for me, it's kind of a mixed thing because it's like, well, the people that are saying, well, what about other people have a point? However, the protesters do too. Yeah,
that's why it's quite a dialectic that we're still working with. But the problem's still there, and it still has to be addressed, and it's still going on.
Have you written any music about this movement and your post jail time or anything like that?
I have not yet. At this point, I go with what I'm inspired to write, and right now I'm feel satisfied with what other people are doing with that. One can't do everything, and
right.
As you well know too, that if you're a seminary student, your time is just a little limited.
Right. Tell me about it. It's like, I'm busy now and I'm doing all these interviews and stuff, but it's like, I have free time to do stuff now. What in the world?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
So I'm trying to find ways to stay involved musically while I'm doing this. So I do play for the PSR today. In fact, I'm doing that tonight. And I play in the chapel sometimes. And just recently in Christian history class, I had the experience of, we were talking about early Christian music and forms and things like that. And I was thinking, I want to write some of that just to get a deeper feel for not only the times, but the intention. Some of it is time specific, and some of it that the need for liturgy, the need for sacred space still exists today. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try my hand at a Sanctus and a Kyrie and some other things and just seeing what comes of that.
That's really interesting.
I've also found that true in the pagan music that I've written that either comes out of an experience that I've actually had in ritual or just occurs to me as something that would really add to ritual. I wrote one a few years ago called Fairship, and it was just about the journey to Avalon, and it just touched me deeply, and a lot of other people seem to enjoy it.
Well, let me go back a little bit and give a little background on my next question. Okay. There's some times where I think that after reading about Gnosticism and early Christianity, that actually our current pagan movement is kind of like the early Gnostics, early Christians, where, they were the up and coming new religion and, and were totally against the mainstream and all that. And so do you think some of the music in pagan community kind of reflects a similar feel to the early Christian
I hadn't drawn that parallel, but I think a case could be made for that, particularly since the early Christian movement, before it became so regimented, was much more gonzo in a way, much more mystical. And I think there are similarities there. And again, I tend to look for the similarities rather than the differences. And I find it distressing in many ways. PSR is probably the most liberal seminary that you could find. And yet,
on the planet.
Yeah. And yet there are some Christians that don't understand me as a Christo-Pagan. They are fundamentalists, but on the other side, I went to an all-pagan gathering, I guess about 6 months ago, and I found this in other cases too, that there are pagan fundamentalists too. That just thinking the Christians are evil, they want to burn us all again. That's it. I've got 9 blinders on. I've got my, I'm not listening to anything else. And it's, my belief is wanting to do all I can to help break down those barriers. And again, concentrate on what we have in common.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's basically what all of my ministry is about, pretty much. Between the World's Church and even this podcast, because I try to give a fair amount of time to both pagan and Christian topics, and and I've seen that same kind of fundamentalist attitude as well in the pagan community. And it's, in fact, there was a person that I was planning on interviewing, and then I read their Facebook page one day, and they basically said, well, if you've got ashes today on Wednesday, then you should have just unfriend me now. And I'm like, whoa, okay, we're just gonna quietly go away for that.
Their journeys, and I wish them peace and growth. But that's what can you do with that? Yeah,
and and that's basically my attitude toward it. It's like, you're in your space, I'm in mine, and it just seems counterproductive to me to do the same things that you think of the people who are the enemy are doing, quote unquote, the enemy, because, it overall, there's similar goals. I think, there's spiritual growth and spiritual healing and spiritual comfort in either religion. And it just seems counterproductive to say one's the enemy and one's not.
And hate and ignorance and isolation just never help in that.
Absolutely. And it just, I don't know, it just seems kind of strange to me, especially in the pagan context, that, it's pagans are like, hey, we should all worship the way we want, and rah, rah, rah. And, there's like pagan anarchists and pagans that are really into making sure that, their own little tradition is left alone and not berated by people. And yet here they are bashing Christians.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, so, this freedom of religion thing, like, applies to everybody.
Let's face it. Every religion on the planet has done some wonderful things, has some wonderful ideas, and they've also done reprehensible things, things that have done. It's not so much Christianity or paganism. It's what's done in the name of it. Sometimes that is just horrid, and it's not ever going to help anything, because the more you keep those walls of ignorance up, the less sense of that we're all in this together you're going to have.
Yes, exactly. And it seems like that sometimes it's kind of like this growth process too, because there's you've kind of got your, for lack of a better term, you're born again on either side, where they're all like really excited and they found this thing that feeds them spiritually, and it's like, wow, let's go get it. And then, and then it just seems like there's kind of like a maturing process as they get more into their tradition and more of, and some people don't grow out of that, but a lot of people do. And it just seems, I always kind of wonder, like, if you don't grow through your religion what's going on.
Yeah, and sometimes we embrace that change and that growth, and other times we resist it. And things that we do give up have claw marks all over them.
Right? For real.
I'm reminded of that right now because I've been in a Gardnerian coven for several years, and now I am at a point where I'm needing to grow in a different direction. They're my friends there, though, but it's time that I need to, for my own growth, and they'll remain my friends, that I have to move on to something that has, because I am a very interfaith and synchronous person, something that's open to other traditions as well, and just exploring that.
Right. And, and I hope that they are letting you go with with love and with like, okay, good luck and, keep in touch.
I actually haven't talked to them yet. Planning to do that soon, because I realized that I just need to, and it will be very much, that will be not a problem at all. They will let me go to journey in my growth with blessings. And it's like not like I'll never see them again or never go to a ritual or something like that. So, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Need to move on.
I mean, that's good, because, there are some groups that would be really, like, I've seen it happen to other people where they're, in fact, I saw it with one woman I used to know a long time ago, where she was in a particular pagan group, and she started talking to the group saying, I can't let go of Jesus in my life. I need Jesus in my life. And they basically not quite shunned her, but pretty much, and gave her a really hard time. And, I know for me, that's one of the reasons why, I hope that, we kind of have that as a unwritten rule in our coven. Well, actually, is it written? Well, anyway, that if somebody's path changes, even to the point where they have to leave, I would hope that we would definitely be very supportive and be very encouraging and saying, okay, good luck, and, come back and visit.
And an experience that I did have with my coven, specifically with my high priestess, surprised me. She called me one day when I announced that I was going to seminary, and really grilled me for about 20 minutes, even though that she attends a church as well, too. I think they'd had an experience, apparently, where one member, I don't know if that person actually gave away the secrets of the coven, which, of course, is a big no-no, or just they were concerned that they were going to. But, she just needed to be reassured that I would not. And of course, I would never do anything like that. I very much respect any spiritual and religious group. And as I said, they're my friends, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just common sense to me. It's like you respect
everyone.
Yeah. You respect what, you go into anything and you respect the group and its traditions and stuff. Like, we don't have secrets as far in our coven specifically, but we do keep confidential what happens in our groups, what happens individually, what we talk about and things like that. And I think it's a matter of integrity. You just need to have that integrity. And I think if you practice that through whatever spiritual path you're going through, then I think people are going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I wish it was kind of more prominent in that way, because, it just seems like there's a lot of infighting in both communities, really, about who's right, who's wrong, and not enough, hey, let's all be in this together.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the future of more syncretist kind of ideas? Because it seems like we especially with the rise of the internet, and I've mentioned this before on other podcasts, it seems like people are moving more towards a more syncretic form of spirituality than, we're kind of going back to the beginning where, when Christianity first came around, it was much more syncretist then. And it seems like we're kind of coming back around with the rise of the internet. We're coming back to more syncretic forms of worship and practice.
I think that's very true. We are coming full circle. And I think the internet has helped in that there's more exposure. The world has shrunk. We can share information in a greater way. I don't think the entire world is with us on that yet. Witness the, religious wars, going on the planet, and God, things that ISIS is doing. Don't get me started on that. But I'd like to see that spread further, so that we can understand each other. I think by nature, we are aware of that connection. I think we're born that way, but increasingly, as we went through the centuries, that was tended to be trained out of most people. We became more discreet in the other meaning of the word, of being separate. And now I think it's time to come back together again.
Yeah. And I think I've called it before, we're kind of in humanity's kind of in our bratty teenager stage where, we're like, everybody look at me, and, I'm right and you're wrong, and that's all there is. And it just seems like, there's a good proportion of people really kind of holding on to particular traditions and kind of coming to the 21st century kicking and screaming.
Yeah. But it is the way of the future. And I think it will. I'm not one of these people that believes in doom and the end of the world is near. No, I'm not a Pollyanna either. I can be a pragmatist. It's going to take a while. But I think we are moving in a very healthy direction ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of thought about it, and this was kind of a thought that came about through several different classes in seminary, especially when we were talking about the New Testament and, what people believe of the second coming. And there's a part of me that thinks that the second coming is happening, that, those of us who are looking for peace and love and compassion and a more connected, syncretic, let's all work together instead of focusing on all the differences, accepting the differences, but not focusing on what's different and going, you're right, you're wrong. I think that, to me, at least, seemed like more of what the second coming is, instead of, this Ooga Booga Jesus coming back and wreaking havoc, That's
what I always felt too, that I felt, Paul has his issues.
Right.
He got it wrong about the second coming. It wasn't about a corporeal return of Jesus. Jesus gave us the tools, as others have before us, as Buddha did, as many other spiritual leaders have done. It's up to us to use them. It's taken quite a while. Some of us are using them, and some of them are a little resistant, or a lot resistant to do so. But again, I think that's the way that we are moving.
And I hope it sticks. I mean, I hope it really, it seems like it is. There seems like there's groups that are really kind of in that progressive mold and are sticking in for the long haul. It just seems, sometimes it seems like there are times where I think it's almost futile, but then there are times where I see it work beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's true as well.
What do you think is the future, going back to music, what do you think is the future of spiritual music?
I think that too. There's proponents of traditional music and tradition-specific music, and that will continue. But I think there's more room, increasingly more room, for the truly spiritual music. I tend to differentiate a little bit, and people use these terms different, that religion is sometimes what keeps us separate, whereas a spirituality is something that's contained in us all and that brings us together. That, I think, is what's going to be happening more. That's what I want to do to the best of my ability. And there's certainly no halo or anything above my head. There's times where I feel I'm getting it. Other times I feel like, God, there's so much stuff I'm still trying to work through.
Right.
But I think it's a journey rather. So much of it is, certainly our lives on this planet are about a journey rather than a destination. I don't think there's going to be or a need for a rapture where many people are taken up somewhere, wherever they're going, and other people are left behind. We're all in this together. We're all going to go together.
I think you're right. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, that future, I think maybe there's a lot more. I think syncretism is kind of the future, no matter, in art, you see a lot of it in art now, and in a lot of the arts. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting because there are some people that are really, well, we were talking about this before, there's some people just coming at it kicking and screaming and, are very resistant to change. And, it's interesting sometimes to see when there is a change in the person to see, oh, wait, maybe this isn't so bad.
Yeah. And like I said, sometimes just the very fact of change is difficult for some people. I had a little bit of thing about it today. I mean, a lot of technology I've embraced, and once I do, I'm comfortable with it. I've been involved with Skype before when other people have done it, but I've never done it. So it's just like a little bit of, oh. Then they go, oh, what was I so resistant for? This was easy.
And it's interesting because sometimes, even with the resistance to technology and, and you've seen, and I've seen it in both, just everyday life, like you're saying with Skype and everything. But I've also, I've also seen it in music and paganism too. There's people that are very adamant that you can't use technology in circle. And, there are a lot of people, musicians that are very adamant about certain instruments, or like they only do their music a certain way. And it's interesting how it's like technology's creeping in slowly. Because like we, our coven doesn't really shy away from the technology, but we're just kind of geeky that way. And, and we'll use our iPads in circle or iPhones and things like that. And it just seems like the technology is sneaking into our lives as a very good and useful tool.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to necessarily have to have a book of shadows that's always in your hand of right. I mean, the hard drive of shadows is fine.
Right. Well, we're just about out of time. Okay. So if people would like to contact you to ask you questions about music or whatever, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can either email me at laurhot, LAURHOT @gmail.com.
Do you have a website for your stuff, or are you just?
Well, I've got a series of cloud drives right now. Just like I just haven't gotten around to revamping. I haven't had time really to work with a website, so I keep stuff on Dropbox and Box.com and iCloud and stuff like that. But eventually, I'm going to do that. Or at least put up another fairly simple one.
Excellent. Well, we can always add that to the show notes when that's done, and you can come on again and talk about it.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, this has been fun today.
Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah. So, thank you very much for coming on by.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank Lauren for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can support This Week in Heresy by subscribing to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, following us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast, or financially through Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.